I do have an application that I do have here where I can be able to query my server and get elements from the database. In this case, I'm querying for nearby stores, right? My current address is 90 Albert Street, Brunswick, East Victoria 3057, Australia, right? This is in Melbourne, Australia, right? If I query for stores which are within 2-kilometer radius, I do get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can change this to 1 kilometer. The distance changes here, as you can see. Now I get three fields from the database, right? Or 3 elements from the database, right? And you can see my URL, this long latitude here and longitude, right? And also the whole address is also here, right? Okay, so this is Brunswick, Australia, right? If I check quickly my database, I can just select all. You can see I've got 7 records, right? 7 records in my database. And for the city, I have Melbourne and also Melton, right? Let's look at the map. Here's the map. This is where Melbourne is, and this is where Melton is, right? It's a distance of something like 40 kilometers, right? Right, let me try to change the address. I'm gonna select this address and I'll come here and change this address from 90 Albert Street in Melbourne, Australia. I'm gonna change that and put the one in Melton, right? I've changed the Melton to put that. I only get two fields from the database, and if I check in my Neon database, you can see from Melton I actually have 2 elements here, right? So this is basically what you're building, right? The other thing that you can do here as well is actually to add a store. If you click where it says add store, you come to this page here where you can actually be able to put an address. You can enter an address here. There's auto completion that will happen behind the scenes, and you can be able to capture the address, city name, the geocoordinates, which is longitude and latitude, right? So we do have 232 High Street here. So let's look for another address, which is perhaps maybe 230. Okay, so let's say 230 High Street. High Street. Sorry, it's High Street, not Night Street. So High Street, it should be in Melton, right? High Street. What does it say here? Melton, right? So High Street, then I'll type Melton. There we are. There's the address, right? As soon as I select that address from the auto completion, actually Mapbox API captures that for me, the address, the country, the city, and the geocoordinates, right? Then if I can say save store, my store is saved successfully in my database. I'm just gonna go back to the home page. If I go back to the home page, the previous address is still persisted here, right? But now I have 3 entries in my on my search here. There's 3 entries on my search, right? Can change it to 10 kilometers. Still I have 3, because in the Melton city I only have 3 recorded stores, right? So this is basically what we are building, right? So this is an extension. This tutorial is an extension of a previous tutorial I once did that I was explaining how to capture user location details, the address auto completion, like what you're seeing right now, or that you can do in React. So I did an extensive explanation of how you can use Mapbox API, how you can create an account here, how you can hook it up with your React application, and how you can be able to do reverse geocoding, that is getting your address or maybe perhaps getting your longitude and latitude, right? So I'll put the links in the description so that if you want an in-depth explanation, you can go to this tutorial, right? But what we're going to do today is just an upgrade of that tutorial. This time around, we're actually using the real stores, right? You need a Mapbox API for this, right? But you can use your Google API, Google Maps API, it's all good, right? So for Mapbox, you might need a credit card. They are very generous, right? Once you sign up, you have an option to go to your account. If you go to your account, inside your console, under admin, there's tokens, right? You can click on tokens and be able to create a token which looks something like this, right? That token that is the one we're going to be using for geocoding, right? That is for search, right? They are actually generous. They actually give you to load the map on your application web app. You have 50,000 free loads, right? And for geocoding, like what we're doing now, you've got 100,000 free requests. So you can actually use it without paying for a small basic application, right? Okay, so we'll need a Neon database. Because I'm using Neon database, I'll encourage you as well to go to Neon, sign up for Neon, create a database. You get a database URL there, and you hook it up in your environment of variables, right? So if you go to your code editor, then under env, just put your database URL as well as your Mapbox token, right? Or Mapbox access token, if I can say it right. So the way I did it on my VS Code is just to name my environment of variable, database URL, and next public Mapbox access token, right? Just like that. Okay, cool. So that's the first thing you need to set up on a VS Code, right? This completed code is actually available on my GitHub repo. I'll put the link in the description so that you can be able to refer to it and be able to follow along, right? Okay, let me just close this, and we're gonna be using Drizzle ORM, right? There's a tutorial for you to follow along. That's the same way I did as well, where you can hook up Drizzle with Neon Postgres, right? You just follow this tutorial straight. It's simple and straightforward to follow it, right? Okay, then also we're going to be using PostGIS. There's also a guideline, right, where how you can use PostGIS, and I'll put this link as well in the description so that you can be able to go and read on your own and see what's happening here, right? Okay, so without wasting time, let's look into our code, right? The first thing that I did is to set up my database. I followed that tutorial. I created a folder on the root of my project here, right? I named the folder DB, right? Inside DB, I've got a schema file and the index. First of all, let's look at the schema. Looking at this schema, that's exactly what I followed on the Drizzle PostGIS here schema, right? You can see to set up your database, you need an extension. I'll show you how to do that. Then you need a table. We're gonna have a table that says stores, right? And we just need an ID, name, and the location. And we also need an index here, right? There's a reason why to put an index. Quickly do a research. Why do we need to index our database, our tables, right? You can quickly do a research and you get an explanation there, right? So this is the schema that I have. I have my ID. There's a way I'm generating an ID on my application. On the lib, right, under the lib, under utils, there is a function that says generate unique ID. I'm using the inbuilt crypto, right, so that I can be able to quickly generate an ID. And the IDs, ladies and gentlemen, they look like this. So all the IDs I'm generating, they just look like that, right? Okay, cool. So that's how I'm doing to generate an ID. Then let's quickly go and look at our schema again. The name, I'm just creating a random name. I also have a file inside the lib that's called generate stone name, right? This is just a simple way of generating names randomly on my side, right? You can just use AI or ChatGPT to say, create for me a function that generates random stone names, right? Then you can get something like that, right? Okay, cool, right? Then going forward with our schema, on the image, I just put a default image that you can see in my public here, which is store.jpg. That's the image I'm using. Then the address, country, city, and location, these points, I'm actually getting them from Mapbox, right? So there's a geocoding that's happening. That's where I can be able to get those. I'll show you how I'm actually doing that, right? Okay, good. So that's my schema. And now let's look in the index.ts. This is simply following the tutorial. You can hook up your Neon database and your Neon SDK there, right? And pass in the database URL, right? Then you can say export const.db Drizzle, pass in the SQL, right, and the schema, just like that, right? Okay. Inside this folder as well, I have a queries folder. This is now where I'm querying the stores, right? I'll come back to this folder as well and this file later on, right? There's also migrations. This is now you converting your schema into SQL, right? And that's why we're using Drizzle ORM. It allows us, it does that for us under the hood, right? But you need this file on the root of your project, right? drizzle.config.ts. So this is my config for Drizzle. It says look for schema in this location, then the output of the SQL, put them in this location. I'm using PostGIS, and this is my URL for my database. So that's basically it, right? Cool. So that's the DB configuration, right? So let's move on to the next step. Let's look at our component which is responsible for location management, right? Or yeah, rather, let's say location management and address lookup, right? So that component is actually this component here, right? It looks like a button where we are able to show the dialog just like that, right? So basically it's a dialog which we are triggering a button. We click on a button, then it triggers a dialog just like that. So this component up to here to the address change here, we're gonna call that component store locator. Let's look into our code and look at that store locator. In our project, under components, common store locator, right? Please take note, I've updated this code to use chassis and UI. So we are making use of chassis and components here, button, dialog, input, toast, and toaster, just like that, right? So let's look at this code. All the imports that are necessary, I've imported them here, and I'm also using useState. I've done a considerable explanation about suggestions, address auto-completion, capturing the address inside the local storage in my previous tutorial. Please go to that tutorial and watch it and get an explanation. Otherwise, here I'm just gonna do a quick explanation, right? Right. So on this on this component, it's a client component. We're making use of search params, right? So let's look at the key features. We're actually doing location management here, right? We're also doing a address lookup, and you have a search dialog that I showed you earlier on, right? And also whenever something changes, there's also navigation and making use of query parameters, right, that you get. We're also doing an error handling here as well, right? An error handling, right? So the main functionalities here, for example, let's start with the let me just minimize these, all of these, right? So let me just start with the use effect here. So our use effect here, it loads the last searched result, searched location from the either query parameters or from local storage, right? So I'm getting hold of my longitude, latitude, and address from query parameters. So if there is latitude and longitude, then set the location to this, which is latitude and longitude. Make sure they're actually numbers, right? Because those numbers, they're the ones we send to the database for actually, yeah, we can either use them in the database, but from the search box from the query params, they're actually like a string. So we need to change that to a number. So if there's an address, set the address to this, right? Make sure you set the local storage to this address, saved address. You can all actually get the address if it's available, right? So here we're setting the address if it's not available, but otherwise if it's available already, we just need to get that address, right? Okay, so that's what our use effect is doing here, right? Then we go to the get location. This location fetches the coordinates from Mapbox and updates our URL. So we are searching the coordinates. So we provide an address to use, right? A human readable address to use, and from there we get the longitude, latitude, right? Then we can either set the local storage, then we push to this URL here. Cool, right? Then let's go to the handle address change. Handle address change, we actually fetches auto completion suggestions, right? We're doing it auto completion suggestions, right? So all these suggestions here, right? So as soon as we are typing, if there's something that is coming and we see an address that we are looking for, this is the function that's handling the fetching of that, right? And the suggestion click now, and the suggestion click is actually selecting the suggested address, right? Selecting the suggested address. Then if you go to handle distance change, it updates the search radius in the query params, right? So yeah, that's where the handle address change is working. Otherwise, if we click like this and we type a new address, that's the handle address change that is responsible for bringing us at the address. If we click on an address, the handle suggestion click is the one that is responsible for selecting that address, right? So that's the store locator component, right? Then let's look into what are we using to fetch now these stores down here. Let's look at a function called get nearest stores, right? So this is the page, the home route page that we do have, and we have a special function here that is called get nearest stores. And in this function, you can see what we're getting is the latitude, longitude, then we've got this number here 5 and maximum distance, right? Let's look in that function. That's the function I told you about, which we have in our DB. So inside DB, inside queries, stores, we do have that get nearest stores, right? So we are capturing the latitude, the longitude, which is a number, the limit, it's 5, and maximum distance, which is optional, it's also a number, right? So we return a promise, which is actually a store response promise, right? And this type, we get it from our types, right? So let me go in my types, store types. So the store response is actually sending back this. It's an array of stores which has got latitude, longitude, and also this object success, false, or an error, right? Okay, so let's look at this function here, right? I've just tweaked some of things, play around some of things to match actually this tutorial that we do have on the documentation, right? So if you go to PostGIS, now we are querying, right? We are querying stores, right? So we need this SQL point. Please take note of how we write it. This is now PostGIS in action. These are some of the functions we used, right? So to compute distance, you can use this operator and distance function, blah 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 blah. So you actually put them like that. You can select from get stores by distance, you can order by, right? Then you can place a limit of 1, right? So we are playing around with SQL. Okay, so let's look at how we did it in our own function. In our own function, we are getting these already from the params, right? Then we get the user location, we need an SQL, and we have these functions that we're using here, right? Make point, make sure we capture the longitude and the latitude, and you put that number in just like that, right? Then we have a base query, right? So use SD for accurate distance calculation in meters. So our base query, basically we are doing this, we're getting the ID, the name, the image, the address, the distance. So from the base query, what we're trying to do is if there's a base query, do this. If there is a maximum distance, because that's the only optional param that we're getting, if there's a distance, do this, right? Add a distance to our query. Otherwise, just bring us a base query where we just have the longitude, latitude without the distance, right? Okay, so from that result that we get here, you can just order there by distance versus user location, so based on the location that you are. So let's say, for example, there is a shop which is 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, 3 kilometer from you. They'll be ordered in that sense, right? You won't get a store which is further. You start by a store which is close by first, right? Otherwise, return this response now, the whole store, or else return with a distance, right? Distance will be in actually meters here, right? Okay, good. So that's what we're using now on our page. it's a server component. As you can see, it's a server component, and we're getting a lot of search params. So the search params now, these are the search params that we get here: longitude, latitude, and the address, and the maximum distance, just like that, right? So we get that is search params. So if there's a latitude, right, it's a string, convert it to a number. Longitude, convert to a number. Distance, convert to a number, right? And we would like to make sure like we always have an array. So we just say let stores equals the object that we have, that we're gonna get from the database with that type. Otherwise, just bring an empty array so that we don't have any error when our page loads, right? So if there's latitude, then trigger that that function, right? Trigger that function. Otherwise, if there's an error, just throw an error from our function here, which is actually a server function. The error in this case will be success false, right? Okay, so once we get the stores, now we just map them over to display those stores on the UI. That's basically what we're doing. Good. We have seen how to fetch stores actually, change an address, change the distance, and fetch the results. Now let's look at how we can actually be able to add one store, right? Okay, so for that we need another component, which is basically this, right? So in our code we have termed that to, let's go into components, common address search, right? So this is the component that we're using, the couple functions there, right? And inside our app we've got a route called add, and we've initialized with page.tsx. So basically we're importing that component here, right? So the address search, basically what we're doing, we have state management here, right? We're using state management. So this address stores the current input value, the suggestions. We are also doing auto completion, so it holds the location suggestions from Mapbox, the selected place. Now this one stores the full details of the chosen location, right? So we are doing fetch location suggestions. So when you type 2 or more characters, right, it makes, you are making an API call to Mapbox, right? Then a drop down is displayed with the address suggestion. If you click on them, you select an address. Clicking a suggestion sets the address, and it extracts the location details. In this case, we're extracting the country, city, latitude, and longitude, right? So here we're handling the address suggestions, right? We're getting a response from Mapbox here, right? And now here from the suggestions that we get, we're getting the place name from the suggestion. It's going to be the address, right? The country, this is what we are doing from the suggestions. We are actually finding something that starts with country, right? And we set that for a city. We look for the place. Then we now set the address, the country, the city, longitude, and latitude, just like that. Then we have a function now that says handle save store. This is where we trigger now our server action, right? We trigger our server action to fire, right? And to that server action, we're actually passing the address, the country, the city, latitude, and the longitude, right? Exactly. So when a user clicks this save the store, it sends the location data to the backend function, and if successful, the form is resetted, right? The form is resetted, and it shows a success toast. So we'll show a toast here, right? Show a toast here. If there's an error, then the error shows on the toast again, right? So that's basically it. And while you are inputting and selecting address, the things that you've selected, they're actually displayed here, right? Okay, So that's basically what we're doing here, right? So now let's look at the save, store, server action. Save, store is in our app, in our actions, create, store. So if you go in our actions here, create, store, right, we are getting these parameters here. The address Mapbox provides, all these Mapbox provides, but the address we generate it on our own, and the name is just randomly creating by the function I explained earlier on, right? Then the location, this is basically how we're saving our location now. Location, we say SQL, then we use these PostGIS functions, right? And make sure you have that, just like that. So if we look into our PostGIS tutorial that we have here, that's basically how we're doing it to save a store, right? So to save a store, to insert, make sure you also put a location. So for us, we're putting with SQL row, just like that. That's basically how we're doing it, right? So we capture our longitude and our latitude, and we pass this number. Always make sure you pass this number here, right? Once you hit that and hit save, if you check in your database, it's actually saving as this. It's like a number, just like that, right? But also, if you look at the tables that have been created by SQL, there are these other tables that are created by PostGIS, right? And there's this special ref. It has got a lot of data in it, like I think thousands of rows, if I'm not mistaken, right? Thousands of rows, just like that. All right, cool. So let's do something here. Let's do something, right? Once you have set up your database, you want to perform your migrations, right? So for that, you run let's look at the tutorial for you run npx drizzle kit, right? And you have something like this, right? You have something like this. But now, since you're using PostGIS, there's need for you to also create this extension here, right? I've done that for you, right? If you look at my code, once you hit generation, so first of all, you need to run npx drizzle kit generate here. It will generate you this from here up to here, right? It will generate you up to this. Now to create the PostGIS extension, you need this extra line of code, extra lines of code. Make sure you copy and paste it in your generated file and put it at the top, at the beginning, right? Because if you put it at the end, you receive errors in your Neon database saying, you know, you just received some errors. I forgot the errors when I was experimenting, but make sure you put this at the top, right? So once you have that, put it at the top, you hit save, then that's the only way now you can come and run npx drizzle kit migrate or drizzle kit push, right? Exactly, right? So that's how I've done it on my side, and it should be working on your side as well, right? And the create store server action is just like that, where we're importing these other functions I explained to you, the generate random store name and generate unique ID, right? If everything goes well and you've updated your code to look like mine, you should have a way to query stores based on the distance of where you are, right?